Okay. Uh, Hello from New York, everybody. I'm Chris Kelly. I'm co-founder of Convene. We're a workplace as a service platform specializing in full service conference and enterprise flexible workspace solutions. Today, I want to speak with you guys a bit about the evolution of co-working and flexible workspaces as an element of the real estate business, and really dig into not only the kind of the surface level headlines and catchphrases that are often circulated in the press, but to really deconstruct what are the forces that are creating these changes, to answer the question about why is all this happening, and is this a trend or is this a paradigm shift in the way that people are consuming real estate, and then to dig into what are the implications for different people in the industry. What are the implications for landlords? What are the implications for tenants of all sizes? And what is the relationship between the flexible workspace movement and the Proptech movement, which oftentimes are discussed in siloed conversations, but I believe are very intrinsically connected and will be driving each other's success. As an entrepreneur, I believe that where there's change, there's opportunity, which means that this is a really great time to be in the real estate business because we are experiencing unprecedented change. And while a lot of people have been reflecting on how fast the world is moving, something that we often underestimate is the fact that the world will likely never move this slowly ever again. And so for people like myself and other entrepreneurs and future-minded people, the fact that the ground is moving so quickly creates perpetual opportunity that is very unsettling to incumbent and legacy large providers, but really makes this a tremendously exciting time to be somebody who is on the innovative and emerging end of the real estate spectrum. What I'd like to go through with you guys today is first to unpack the forces of change, then to deconstruct kind of how this is changing the roles of corporate real estate executives and their relationships with their landlords, and then really start to pick apart co-working and to stop using this as a general theme, which is a blanket statement, which is almost as broad as saying something like technology, and to really pick apart the different types of players that are emerging in the space and how different companies are using these solutions. I'll touch a little bit on best practices, and then I want to share with you guys just a little hint of what we're doing at Convene and how we're responding to these changes. So I'd like to start with why. What is really going on here? And instead of just thinking about the symptoms that we see emerging, what is the underlying root cause for the emergence of flexible workspace, of PropTech, things of that nature? So first, I'll start off by sharing my perspective that what is happening at the highest level is that the shared economy and the the technology-enabled movement is on a collision course with real estate, which is the largest asset class on the planet. And so we're seeing a tremendous amount of transformation and change that is resulting from this kind of big bang cataclysmic event where really every single element of this traditional and very large business and asset class is being reinterpreted and redeployed. For companies who are the decision makers, for your large global occupiers and even your smaller tenants, CEOs are very conflicted in how they're supposed to be using real estate. On one hand, organizations have a need for efficiency. The reason being is that given the pace of change in the world today, that CEOs can't really see more than 24 to 36 months into their future. And so the idea of signing a 10 or 15 year lease is very much in very much goes against the short-term visibility that they're experiencing. And so we have increased volatility, which is pushing companies to be more efficient and agile in their real estate footprint. The goal of an executive is to align their real estate costs and other costs and expenses with their business, to perfectly align it with the opportunity and requirement that their business has. And flexible workplace and flexible real estate has the ability to create a closer alignment between their need and their expenses than traditional real estate does. And this is helping companies to be much more efficient and agile in a very fast-moving world. Now, on the other hand, what is keeping CEOs up at night is not the cost of their real estate. What keeps CEOs up at night is their access to talent. And especially as traditional businesses in mass are redefining themselves as technology-enabled businesses, every business in the world is now competing for tech talent, which means that every workplace is competing against the Googleplexes and the Apple Parks and the Facebook campuses for a very finite group of kind of typically millennial, technology-minded and able talent. And so this is leading them to want to create workplaces that are much more experiential, much more lifestyle-oriented, and much more amenitized than a traditional office. So the challenge that you have in being a CEO today who's in charge of making decisions around real estate and other things is, do you go with something that is strictly very efficient, very lean, and very cost effective, and sacrifice the quality of workplace experience that you need to attract and retain talent? Or do you spend tons of money on building these environments yourselves with a high end of design, high end service, high end of amenities? The solution that is being created in the space that's being pulled apart between these two contrasting factors is the flexible workspace movement. And so the agility is being solved for by flexible work, and allowing companies of all sizes, of all scale, of all wherewithal to be able to use workplace as a competitive element in the war for talent. In this changing atmosphere, there is a redefinition of roles, and specifically the expectation of internal corporate real estate professionals is really shifting from being very tactical and expense minded to being much more strategic and asset minded. So this diagram helps to articulate the old versus the new. The old occupier is extremely cost focused. They think about paying the lowest cost per square foot. They tend to be reactive and tactical in the way that they're responding to business needs, and especially in a world that is moving as quickly as the world today, they are at risk of falling behind of what the business requirements are. Generally speaking, real estate has been controlled by analog type systems, where very few things are really accurately measured, and especially are usually intermittently measured at best, but not measured in real time. And you have the traditional paradigm of having every single individual user is reporting to a single desk, and typically that is creating a very high degree of inefficiency and under occupancy. In this world, real estate is really thought of as an expense instead of as an asset. And so the real estate professional is likely reporting up through a CFO or a procurement person who's typically extremely cost minded. And as a function, real estate has traditionally been relatively siloed from other adjacent business interests, and has traditionally very rarely been in touch with the real decision makers who are overseeing strategy and technology and recruiting and human resources. The new paradigm is a stark contrast to the old fat cat real estate persona. this person is extremely focused on value, which is not necessarily looking for the absolute cheapest solution, but looking for the most effective and agile solution that supports the real-time business needs. That an agile occupier is somebody who is very proactive in putting themselves and aligning their department with the strategic objectives of their companies, and is helping to position real estate as an asset to make the company more competitive, and putting the company closer to their customers and in a position to attract and retain talent better. The new world of real estate is hyper powered by being digitally connected and starting to collect data that allows executives, whether they're corporate real estate executives, CFOs, and CEOs, to have real-time visibility into the way that real estate is being consumed in their organizations, and creating real-time alignment between their costs and their needs. And we're moving towards activity-based workplaces, where now that work is completely mobile, the idea of reporting to a desk every day is obsolete. And we're starting to consume our workplace real estate in a way that may be progressive inside of the office, but is very familiar to anybody who's ever worked on a college campus. That when we were on a college campus, you would always just work in the place that best suited the task at hand. And your teachers and professors never asked you where you got the work done. You were only graded on the quality of your output and your product. And so just like the way that in a university setting, you may study in a library, you may do collaborative work in a cafe, and teaching and learning happens in a classroom, and you always have the liberty to read a book under a tree or in the comfort of your own personal space. Likewise, corporate campuses and even smaller offices are moving towards much more activity-based and campus-style workplace. The future real estate professional is somebody who should not only report to the CEO, but to be working in really deeply close collaboration with human resources and IT, to help to make sure that the real estate strategy is integrated with the digital strategy for the business. And that real estate is being used, is being applied to its highest and best use, which is as a weapon in the war for talent. In response to this, landlords have an opportunity and an obligation, but in some ways a risk also, to respond to the changing nature of needs for corporate real estate requirements and for the professionals who are overseeing those departments. The transformation is really about landlords abandoning the old way of doing things, which is really they sell a commodity, which is measured as concrete slab that's sold by the square foot, towards being much more inside of a retail mindset where they're selling experience, and they should really be pricing real estate on a per person basis as opposed to selling it in raw square footage. That instead of thinking of a select few C-suite executives as being the customer in real estate, or even worse, a lot of landlords think about the capital markets as being their true customer, if they're being honest. Progressive landlords and agile landlords really understand that talent and the everyday user of their assets is their customer. And this is a really important change, because when in any business, when your customer changes, everything about your business changes. And so what we're really seeing is the transformation of real estate being this, a wholesale product to being much more of an experiential retail industry. In that transformation, we're seeing long-term leases are being either replaced by flexible workplace, but for large enterprises, it's not going to be a complete replacement, but it's going to be a hybrid strategy where the core of the office requirement is going to be served through longer-term leases, maybe more flexible than a traditional lease, but still a longer-term requirement. But that the the tenants would have the ability to flex into on-demand spaces. So not only on-demand workplace, but also that buildings would use their economies of scale to help to create other services like food services, large conferencing, fitness, wellness, things of that nature. There, where the scale of the building can start to be used to create value for the everyday user and the customer. And the level of service inside of these environments is moving from being really landlord provided services being just a utility, which is things like, their cleaning and engineering, to landlords having an obligation to start to provide a degree of experience and hospitality, to have amenitized lobbies, to have coffee shops, to have on-demand catering for the building, on-demand food service, potentially even on-demand technology services for their users, to be running community programs, tenant engagement, but also professional education inside of buildings. And that if landlords do that, they'll be able to not only attract and retain the best tenants in the market, but really they'll be able to decommoditize their product and command a much higher price point for their traditional real estate. So just I'll take a broader market view, and now that we understand the roots of all these changes, here's what we're seeing in the market. And here's why these statistics, which are really earth-shattering statistics for a market that's the size of real estate, now we know what's behind these things. Let's look at the numbers and the projections for a second. JLL predicts that up to 30% of corporate real estate will be consumed as flexible by the year 2030. 2030 is not that far away. And if you think about the fact that, today, typically, in a market, you'll have something like a 1 to 2% market share of flexible workspace relative to traditional real estate. What we're going to see in the next 10 years is an absolutely massive transformation and reinterpretation of the real estate industry. The evidence of this is starting to present itself, that 50% of U.S. co-working square footage has opened since 2015. And in New York, we have 10% of leasing activity in this year, 2018, is attributed to flexible workspace. And so you can see that what was looked at as an outrageous prediction that was made, just 12 or 18 months ago is now really starting to become reality at a very fast pace. What's happening as the market is expanding and maturing is that you're starting to see specialization of brands who are starting to claim different customers along these spectrums of price and experience. And this is not to say that any one brand here is better than any other brand. It's to say that as the market matures, that we're starting to have brand specialization that kind of resembles what we are already very familiar with inside of the hotel world, where you may have, the Marriotts and of the world may be like a Regis, a WeWork may be like a W, and a Convene would be something more like a Four Seasons or a JW Marriott. However, we really don't see ourselves as being a luxury service provider, but we're very much at the high end of the professional spectrum. But we're seeing that there's going to be spaces for everybody, and here you can see the category leaders that are carving up the larger slices of the pie. But we also see the emergence of co-working spaces that are female-only co-working spaces like The Wing. We're seeing nonprofit co-working spaces like CSI in New York. We're seeing other manufacturing-based co-working spaces. We're seeing, kitchen-based co-working spaces where some of the industrial infrastructure is also being provided. And so this is what is happening in the industry as the pie is getting carved up. I would say that every single one of these providers will be successful so long as they continue to focus on serving a single customer better than anybody else in the world. The companies that will not survive will be anybody who thinks that they can serve absolutely everybody from end to end, because that is not the way that branded environments like retail or hotels have ever operated before. Um, Within this, we're seeing that people use the concept of co-working very generically, but we're seeing a lot of specialization between different types of co-working, where I think these quadrants of on-premise, off-premise, off-balance sheet, on-balance sheet really start to explain how the different providers are and services are populating the industry. From an off-premise on-balance sheet solution, sorry, off-premise, off-balance sheet solution, this is traditional co-working. This is, a co-working space that is, or shared workspace that is not in my building and is something that I'm consuming as a service. And this is kind of what Regis has been in the past. This is what a Convene and WeWork has been in the early, in the early versions of all of our models. There's also an on-balance sheet off-premise solution, which is we're seeing things like Verizon hosting, creating their own co-working brands, which is really part of their marketing initiative, where you have corporate-sponsored co-working spaces that are not for their own consumption, but where they're actually trying to bring in innovation and entrepreneurship underneath kind of a corporate-sponsored umbrella. And this is a very small part of the market, but something to just to keep an eye on. And I think that the most interesting and emerging part of the business, and I'll touch on this in more detail in a minute, is we're seeing co-located flexible workspaces, shared services, and amenities that are emerging as an integrated part of a skyscraper type office value proposition. And what's important to note here is that traditionally we have seen that the concept of resource sharing in office has been largely limited to sharing space through flexible workspace and co-working. But the real revolution that we see around the corner is also sharing office services, hospitality services, and amenities, where you're essentially democratizing a Googleplex style workplace and selling it by the desk, office, floor, or multiple floors. And this is really kind of the larger consumerization of the industry. And then of course there's still going to be traditional leases and corporate services, which I do not predict are going away, but will as a category generally move from being kind of more of a utility style workplace to being much more experiential. The most common uses and use cases for agile workplace for enterprise specifically is, it's a great way to facilitate real estate requirements that happen during mergers and acquisitions. We see a lot of satellite offices being spun up as mini headquarters inside of flexible workspaces. So a very progressive tech company that might be in Silicon Valley, when they need to have an office inside of New York or Atlanta or Austin or other markets, where they may not have the critical mass to be able to create an experiential workplace, but if they pool their requirement inside of an environment like a Convene, they would be able to have access to a level of services that they're familiar with in their headquarters, that they can enjoy at a scale that would otherwise never allow for that level of services. We see flexible workspace being used for swing spaces to accommodate overflow, but that's actually, I think, a lesser part of the market than what people estimate it to be. The single biggest thing, and frankly this surprised me when we started rolling out the product, is we're seeing traditional companies en masse using flexible workspace and these kind of branded and very experiential environments as an element of cultural transformation, typically to provide progressive office space that is not like their cubicle farms in their larger offices, that help them to achieve their innovation and talent and tech-driven initiatives. And then lastly is using flexible spaces for non-core real estate, things like large conferencing, things like fitness, things like food halls, et cetera. A lot of these things are moving from being on the corporate balance sheet to being consumed as a service. With what my high view of kind of where we are in the evolution of this business, I would say that the parallel that I like to draw is we are right now at the intersection of where cellular technology was when it went from flip phone to iPhone. And what I mean by that is this is not only an analogy, but actually kind of mechanically the what we've seen in the shared workspace industry to date is that we're taking this new concept, which of really shared economy as part of real estate, and we have been retroactively applying it to buildings, right? So the building and its value proposition have already been fully baked, and co-working is maybe going to take a single floor or two floors in that building, but nobody is changing the way that they're actually consuming real estate because the other tenants that are co-located at that premise have already designed their spaces and already signed their leases, and there's very little incremental value to the entire asset. It's really an individual value proposition that's kind of mutually exclusive to the asset value. That is 1.0, where this new concept is being retroactively applied to the old design. Now, what's really exciting is co-working 2.0, which is like the smartphone, is where this new concept, this new technology, we are building buildings from inception in anticipation of resource sharing. And it's changing the physical design of these spaces where when you start with a new technology and then you ask yourself, what is the best design of a building to accommodate this new concept? That's how you really achieve complete transformation. And so co-working or shared workspace 2.0 is where shared resources, amenities, on-demand services are being built into assets as a forethought. And then what happens is every single tenant that subsequently leases into that building is going to build their space differently and in anticipation of these shared resources. And that will really change the game and increase the amount of market revenue that is going to be flowing through the shared workspace. And this is really what's driving that massive projection in that up to 30% of real estate will be consumed as flexible within the next 10 to 15 years. And in these environments, we're really going from real estate being a commodity and a utility to it being a real experience that is hospitality driven. What this looks like, and frankly, what we're building at Convene, is the best analogy is the future office building looks and operates a lot like a full service hotel. And what I mean by that is that we're seeing that different layers of the building where you have the lobby is fully activated as a third place in the building, and you're going to have food service amenities and a much more approachable type entry experience. That inside of that space, the base of the building, you should have tenant exclusive fitness facilities, end of trip facilities, and things of that nature. And also, much like a full service hotel, you would have shared meeting space, which would not only have the large meeting spaces for things like town halls, but also would have commercial kitchens that would not only serve catering to those floors, but also power on-demand catering to people in the building that would serve like room service inside of a hotel. And then you would have flexible workspace floors that would be built into the asset, and then transitioning into longer term traditional tenancy. But then at the top of buildings, you may have either a tenant lounge or an executive club, like what Convene has built at 75 Rockefeller Plaza in New York. We have an invite-only executive club that tops out the building. Now, I mentioned earlier that the shared workspace movement and technology are not at all mutually exclusive, but are actually deeply connected. The reason for that is that what you see in this future office building as operating like full service hotel, what this is this is the shared economy being applied to real estate to create kind of an on-demand Googleplex. But every single element of the shared economy has always been made possible by technology. The reason why is because increased connectivity leads to decreased transactional friction, which leads to increased convenience and viability of sharing things. And so the traditional references of Airbnb and Uber as being elements of the shared economy, neither of those, industry changing and transforming companies would be possible if it was not for the technology that was connecting the people and the systems with the services and the assets. And so these are deeply connected. And likewise, once workplaces become fully digitally enabled, CFOs and CEOs are going to have a real-time look into the true utilization of their real estate. They will start to have a commanding understanding of vacancy and occupancy in ways that they will not be able to ignore anymore. And that will lead to a much greater adoption of shared workspaces and on-demand services. And so these two different innovations are really kind of spawning one another's growth. So I just real quickly want to touch on what we're doing at Convene, a little bit of how we're different, and then turn it to questions. We are a partner to the world's largest landlords to help them to introduce on-demand services, flexible workspaces, and amenities into their buildings. There are two pillars of our platform. Sorry, let me go back. The two pillars of our platform are shared workspace and shared meeting space. And in both instances, the shared workspace and the shared meeting space is available to tenants in the building on preferred terms and discounted pricing. But in both instances, those services are market facing, where anybody from the business community can use those things for a price. And so we're really blurring the lines between traditional real estate ownership and operations and co-working or shared workspace. And in addition to the two core pillars of workplace and meetings, we also provide a full range of hospitality services ranging from coffee shops and lobbies to community engagement and tenant engagement platforms to room service style catering inside of the buildings, to fitness center management and a whole slew of other services that can be made possible through our competencies in design, hospitality, and technology. Quick background of the company: we've raised just over $250 million to date. But the two stats that we're most proud of are that we have a 91 Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score is a measure of customer satisfaction. 91 puts us right between Apple and Tesla, and puts us above anybody else in the flexible workspace or hospitality category. And we're recognized as one of the top 100 best places to work in the United States. And the culture that we've built at Convene and the way we treat each other internally is the thing that my co-founder Ryan and I are absolutely most proud of. Our current footprint is that we're in these 6 cities, but we're immediately expanding not only in the United States, but also globally. We have development activity in Toronto, London, and plans to go into Sydney, and other markets will follow. Here's just a snapshot of this. Is one of our conference facilities. Our conference spaces, some of them go up to as large as hosting 400 plus people, and this is a full service environment where 100% of the food service operations, technology, audiovisual, presentation services, conference planning, all of these are done in-house by our own Convene hospitality team. And here's an example of our workplace. We now have workplace open in New York, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles. If you know of anybody who needs workspace, you should check us out. But we're rapidly expanding into all of our other markets as well. And we do have food services, on-site kitchens and chefs at every single one of our locations. And so the level of hospitality that we can deliver is truly unlike anybody else who is in our industry. So with that, I want to turn it to questions, which I think are coming through the channel here. But I'll just finish by saying thank you for everybody who tuned in, and was an honor to be part of this. We have a question coming in asking, I believe it's how many square meters is the minimum kind of threshold where these types of services can be offered. Pardon my ignorance, but I'm going to have to answer that question in square feet because we're U.S. based, and that's what I'm most familiar with. We believe that you can have locations that are as small as 20,000 square feet, but increasingly, the Convene locations have been closer to 100,000 square feet within our own controlled footprint. Because really, the larger the space is, the greater the amount of amenities you can offer. And so, a location can be viable as low as 15,000 square feet, providing that you have a good deal with your landlord. But the reality is that the larger the building, probably 40,000 square feet to offer the larger the footprint, 40,000 square feet up to 100,000 square feet of dedicated flexible workspace is what you need for the full thing to work. And typically the buildings that we are in, not just our space, but the entirety of the building is a minimum of 500,000 square feet. And we really find our concept to be most successful in million plus square foot buildings. I should mention that, you don't have to, that's for the full extent of the community programming and food services and everything else, but different elements of the full platform can be offered on a smaller scale. I have a question from Nicholas, which is, how do I educate the market about our offerings, and do we have a dedicated enterprise sales team? And do we build teams in every city that we operate? The answer is yes, we have dedicated enterprise sales teams. The answer is yes, we have dedicated local sales efforts that are cross-threaded. And then, for myself, I've become a spokesperson for the company, but also for the industry. And a big part of the way that I get in front of the right people and doing market education is, not just talking about myself and our company, but really trying to help the world to articulate exactly what is going on, and being a voice that is honestly and objectively educating the market on the trends as I see them. Let me take a second to just read some of the questions that are coming in. One of the questions from Hemant is, how do developers choose between developing their own product versus partnering with a company like Convene? What I would say to any developer who's thinking of developing their own program is that the challenge in being successful is not about building it, but the challenge about being successful is being able to be the provider of choice to customers in an extremely competitive environment. And so the question that people need to be asking themselves is not, is it physically possible to do it? The question you need to ask yourself is, if you are building a program, is it going to be the best program in the world, or one of the top 3 or 4 or 5 programs in the world? Because if not, then how are you going to convince customers to go into your space instead of one of the other competitive spaces that are likely in your market? And so if you were to look under the hood of Convene, I could tell you we have now almost 600 team members who are doing so many different things to make our product absolutely best in class. And we're leveraging, almost 10 years of operating history with constant feedback into improving our platform, our technology systems, our hospitality standards, standard operating procedures, all these other things. To think that you could spin up your own program is a highly ambitious. I think that if you would feel confident building your own full service hotel instead of outsourcing to a Four Seasons or a Starwood or a Marriott of the world, then I think that if you have confidence there, then you can build your own workplace platform. But just like anything in business, it's way more complicated than what it looks like from the outside. One of the questions is how do I see the competition between traditional serviced office and co-working spaces, and who is winning? Real estate is a market that has always been characterized by a high degree of competition and a highly fragmented supply side equation, and I think that will continue to be the case. What I see emerging, if you want to understand the emerging competitive dynamic of co-working spaces and flexible workspace platforms, look at the hotel world, where you're going to see brand specialization of people who are serving different price points and different style and experience preferences. And you're seeing the pie carved up between all different providers. So is WeWork better than Regus or Regus better than Convene? The answer is that we're all more similar than we are different, but the differences are really important, and customers in the market should start to look around and understand who are the companies that identify with your brand. Every one of the shared workspace platforms has its own kind of culture. It has its own subscription to values. And you should really think about, when you're outsourcing your workspace, you're outsourcing an element of your culture. That design is the body language of your organization. And so think deeply about, who are you aligning yourself with, because your brand and your reputation are tied to the workspace provider that you choose. So who's winning? I think everybody is winning who knows who their core customer is. I see a lot of smaller platforms that are emerging who don't seem to have a clear identity or a clear value proposition, and I would be concerned about them. Somebody asked about our plans for Europe. So we have a development team that's on the ground in London right now, and we hope to have some really exciting news to share about our London expansion in Q1 of 2019. That's all we could say about that right now. But I would say that we'll probably use that as a beachhead for broader expansion in Europe, mainly focused kind of starting on English-speaking markets and then potentially branching out from there. We have another person asking about, how do we reach out to our clients? How are we getting business? The war for business right now is really fierce, and I would say that there is no element of the sales and marketing toolkit that we're not leveraging today, and we're developing real expertise across a broad spectrum of channels and mediums, and kind of back to the question of why would a landlord not build this themselves, is just navigating the sales and marketing environment today and being a best-in-class provider is an absolute Herculean effort, and only the best will survive. So I don't see any other unanswered questions. So I'll give you guys a minute if there's anybody listening who wants to ask anything. Otherwise, we can wrap up on time. All right, great. Well, thank you very much, everybody. It was a pleasure chatting. I don't know where you are around the world, or how many of you are there are, but do appreciate you listening in, and please keep an eye on Convene. Um, we post a lot of thought leadership on our blog called Catalyst, and so I would really recommend that anybody who's interested in my point of view or even a broader point of view on the industry. We're trying to put out really the highest quality thought leadership in the industry through our blog Catalyst. So do follow that. And you could follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter at Thoughts on Biz at Convene. And please keep an eye on us. And if there's ever an opportunity to partner or people who would like to work with us, please feel welcome to reach out. We'd love to hear from everybody. Thank you.